On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, the Oklahoma City Thunder season is over. The offseason is right around the corner. How can the Thunder improve this roster?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and SI Thunder beat writer Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO ThunderPod. On today's show, we're diving into the Oklahoma City Thunder and their season. Where did they obviously vastly improve over last year? How can they keep getting better internally? And then what can this offseason look like? All on today's show, brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Check them out today. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with the winning of any $5 bet. That's $150 with the winning of any $5 bet by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On today's show, we're joined by Joel Lorenzi at JX Lorenzi of the Oklahoman beat writer. Joel, how you doing today to start off the offseason? You're muted. You're cooked. What a rip.
Rylan. I was trying to let you talk, Rylan. What's good though? It's been a minute. I haven't seen Rylan since. Man, I don't know. Well, I guess Presti was the last time I saw you. So it's been a while. I'm kicking it at home right now. So that's the reason for my hiatus on Twitter and whatnot.
Back in Chicago, the Windy City. Although I've had a long-standing beef with Chicago that Oklahoma is actually, the Windy City, Oklahoma City.
Please,
a lot of wind. I mean,
it is windy it is very windy in OKC. I just had never heard of it being called the Windy City until I got there, and then I understood it. But I was like, no, it ain't Chicago though. But it is. I mean, yeah, it is a lot of that. I mean, y'all get tornadoes, so
twisters, everything.
Yeah.
Joel, you're wearing the same New York T-shirt that I last saw you in, which I assume you probably haven't changed it since.
No,
yeah, you're just.
Why are you always frying my clothes, dog? Because I just can't. I was at the gym today. All right, I just came from the gym. All right, so why are we doing it? Why don't you do an outfit of the day? Stand up.
No, we're not doing the outfit of the day. But I'm not held to the same standard as someone.
Why not?
As someone as suave as you. I think that's like you're like a fashion icon, and you're wearing red Mizzou hoodies and.
That's cool. We cover Shai and J-Dub. You calling me a fashion icon?
I mean, I think if you ask those two guys who among the beat would you most want to switch wardrobes with, it'd be Adam. You, Daniel. So
don't include Daniel in there. Please.
That's the standard that you're held to. But Joel, reviewing this Thunder season, you're first on the beat, your first time intimately following the Oklahoma City Thunder. What stood out to you as the biggest surprise? Like you got here maybe thinking a certain way, and then something just caught your eye.
Yeah, I mean it's an easy answer, but just how far along they are. I mean, I think when me and Joe started podding, to the beginning of the year, Joe, I don't remember where Joe placed them. He maybe had them 7th or 8th in the conference. I maybe had them 5th or 6th. I was a little higher, and that at the time felt a little crazy. And so just to see how far along they are, I imagine we'll get into this later, but I don't think they need to make any seismic moves. And so just not only how far along they are, but how firm the foundation is. I think the identity they built this past year is something they can run with. I don't think they need any supreme changes. And so just seeing the state they're in now and what they had to build on, I wouldn't have guessed that they would be here when I got on the beat.
Yeah, it's been obviously a season that nobody thought that they'd win 57 games and be the youngest number one seed of all time. The goal, I think, was, hey, it'd be a massive improvement to just go from sub 500 in this tough Western Conference, adding Chet Holmgren to the mix. There were still questions about that. It'd be a massive improvement to just be in the top 6 and not have to play the play-in. It'd be everything breaking your way to have home court for one playoff round. Then they end up being the number 1 overall seed in the West. I think that like it cannot get lost how long these seasons are. Of when you first arrived in OKC, like the questions after the first games and before the season began was could Chet play back-to-backs? Could Chet play the 5? And he answered both those questions by playing all 82 games at the center position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember those first few weeks. I think we were just finding different ways to ask, like how do you, like especially with Mark, like how do you feel Chet's holding up? Chet, how do you feel? Because I mean, it felt, I mean, good bigs are scattered across this league, but it felt like especially the front end of the season was like front loaded with like specific matchups that you would want to see him hold up in. I mean, the first homestand was like Jokic and why is the Detroit's big not coming to mind? I can't think of his name right now.
Isaiah Stewart in there.
Jalen Durham. Yeah. And that was like,
I mean, that's how Chet started his career. Was like, right. Vucevic with the Bulls. You had Mobley and Allen in there with the Cavs. Jokic. You had Duran. You had Zion. You had Draymond. You had Capella. Then you had back to Allen Mobley. Then you had back to Draymond. Then you had the run of the Suns. Then Wemby. Then Draymond again. Like you were just throwing all these bigs, and it felt like every single game before the game, the conversation was, okay, this is the night that he gets tested. Like this is the new challenge. This is Sabonis. Like this is the new, this is the time that we can finally kind of absorb who he is and what he's going to be about. And it was fast and furious in the first month. Like we're mentioning, like he played all those guys plus Embiid, and plus Rudy and Cat, and plus Anthony Davis. So he was tested early, and he really held up.
Yeah, no doubt. And I thought, like to be fair, I think like Sabonis is one of the guys who maybe gave him more trouble. I think that's more like handling DHO to that degree was probably one of the earlier obstacles. But like you said, to play 82, I thought he really started in that game against Embiid. Like I think this was the conversation, like you said, after every game. Like people would be in what's that app? I forget the app people use. It's actually a pretty nasty interface of an app. What's the app people screenshot? It's they use it for box
Real
scores.
Sports or something.
Real
like
Sports. It's so nasty, but they were coming with a Real Sports screenshot, like oh, Chet can't play Jokic or Chet can't play Embiid, and they would come with the Real Sports screenshot. So Chet was ready for sure. I obviously there are parts he can improve. I think offensively, whether that was the wear and tear of the season or like teams just finally getting a scout on him, I think you started to see production slip. But overall, like he held up, and especially like defensively, like he had one of the better rookie seasons defensively in recent memory, probably. So,
yeah, I mean, you look at Chet. That was a massive, portion of this season. We talked about how far they were as a collective unit, but even another surprise I think was J-Dub taking another step that fast, that quickly, and a step that there were certain benchmarks in the season where we were comfortable like dubbing him a future star and potential superstar in this league. Like that's how dominant he was, especially in the fourth quarter, hitting tough shots and being that second go-to scorer for OKC. He obviously still has a lane to grow, but whenever you came in, like obviously last year you were busy covering Creighton, and so like you had your own perceptions of what these players were coming in. Like what did you see from J-Dub in year 2?
Yeah, it's just like you said, that star leap. I don't know if I was so eager to call him like a all-star by next year as like some people were within like the first 2 months. But I think you could see the vision. I mean, the West is tough, so I think it's going to be tough for him to make an all-star game, maybe generally throughout his career. But he'll get some. He'll get some of those nods. He's just that good. As far as like at least before the playoffs, it felt like in terms of as a player, like when you look at like attributes, like the skill set, it felt like there were so few holes in his game. I mean, just in terms of the impactful two-way player. If you need a secondary creator, like he's doing really good stuff on the ball. He's leading the second quarters and the fourth quarters. Like he felt so complete, shot over 40% from three. He's finishing through contact. Obviously, there are things to be done there too that were exposed in the playoffs and in the whole regular season. Like he admits this, that he just couldn't get to the line, whether that's stuff he's doing or just the way they're officiating him. But the signs are there though for him to be a star. And last year, I mean, obviously, like progression and predicting, people's progression, like it's never linear and it's so tough to predict. I mean, a guy could pop off in like year 5, like Andre Jackson could be a all-star in year 5 or something crazy. I don't know. I can't name a specific case that's that crazy, but that's how this thing worked, right? And so I don't know that I thought he was going to be a star, especially this soon. I mean, watching from afar last year, I thought he could be a good starter long term, but he's made that leap for sure.
Yeah, and I think that whenever J-Dub, for the majority of the season, like we can talk about the Dallas series where he did not show up and he was not good in that series, but that's going to be the case for second-year players. They're going to have moments like that. But when J-Dub was at his best this season, the way you would describe him with the tough shot making, with the versatility to play off of Shai on offense, then defensively, what he gives you as a positional defender and those versatilities that he brings on that end of the floor. Like when you describe what he can do, you're describing skill sets that all-stars and above level players have. So I think that's the most encouraging. But this team won 57 games and they lost in 6 in the second round to the Dallas Mavericks with a 0-point differential. So there's not many of these. But like, was there anything that maybe disappointing is too strong of a word, clearly, for what the season was, but something that you felt left wanting more after the year?
Wanting more. We're talking about the playoffs and all that too.
Just the entirety of the season. It can be from the playoffs. It can be just from an individual player. Like again, there's no such thing as disappointment with this team. They were too good. But what is one area where you're like, they could have done a little bit better there?
It's hard to say. I think because I think like the season played out probably how it should have and probably how they wanted to. I mean, obviously you don't want to lose in the second round, but I thought it went about as well as they probably could have predicted it. So I don't know that I would have had to go another way, but I do think like there's stuff that certain areas of development that maybe you got to just leave to the summer, but like maybe you can also work on them in season. But it's hard to say that. Like you could say that in hindsight, but then maybe they don't have a 57-win season. But I thought like generally like things that rise to the surface are like using Chet in the short roll. Like I thought that was something that could have happened more in the regular season, and especially would have helped them in the playoffs. I thought that was a window that when they used him there, when he had, especially against like the switching defense, the one-man zone with Derek Lively, like that was money. Like he would kick to the corner, or he would make a read for the backside. Like he's a smart player, and he'll only get better there. So that was something I thought probably would have benefited them to go more to in the regular season. Even though, like I said, in hindsight, it's hard to say that because he is such a pick and pop option. They're throwing him lobs in the regular season, which aren't there in the playoffs, which is something they probably couldn't predict. So,
yeah, that getting Chet more involved was the only thing I thought that they could have done a little bit more consistently throughout the season, which we're going to talk about a lot coming up as we talk about how this team can improve both internally and also, now that we've set the table, what does this offseason look like for Oklahoma City? But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. Check out FanDuel because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with the winning of a $5 bet. That's $150 with the spreads, money line, player props, and more. Check it out today at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot, every NBA final shot, every Stanley Cup slap shot count more with America's number one sportsbook. Speaking of the NBA Finals, we're almost to game one. We can smell game one at this point, with the Mavericks being 6.5-point underdogs in the TD Garden on Thursday. Joel, are you riding with the Mavericks in game one after Jason Kidd finally got a game one win? Or are you still going to go with the Celtics?
Celtics for sure. Celtics in 6, I think. Which is, I mean, that's not a hot take. So
I've got Mavericks in 6. Let's see who's right at FanDuel.com/lockdown. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Joining me today is the Oklahoman beat writer, Joel Lorenzi. Joel, we discussed this season, like we've set the table for what this season was. It was a fantastic season, never in question there. Having had this year where, you were playing with house money, really, like no matter what happened, nothing disastrous could have happened this year. Heading in now, you look at this team with a more critical eye, a more expectations-driven. Everything ratchets up for this organization from this summer all the way through the end of whatever this core is. Whenever that time comes, this from now on is, hey, you're good enough. You're contenders. Like, you need to be, winning basketball games, and that's the pressure that they're going to have on themselves internally. The pressure that we'll put on them externally. With that being said, heading into this specific offseason, like, what are some of the needs, and like what would be your aggression level this offseason?
Yeah, I've battled back and forth with this because I think a lot of people have, interesting perspectives. I'm not on the side of the fence to where I think they need like a game-changing big man. I'm Chet at the 5. I'm in that camp. I just don't know how you watch the rookie year he had defensively, the second round series he had defensively, and want to move that dude to the 4. And like with his deficiencies too, I think him at the 4, I think people are like, I don't know, the theoretical 5 they're putting next to him is like Jesus Christ. And so Chet with his current fluidity and his handle attacking closeouts, like obviously there are bright spots, but it's not there to be, mocking him to the 4, I think. And like his jumper will have to get quicker for sure. That's something I think we saw in the Dallas series. And so I think Chet at the 5 is how you maximize this thing. And then like generally, I'm on the side where I think their identity, like Dallas outplayed them, right? But they were easily like shooting one game of shooting variance away from changing that series probably. And so I think the way they get shots is more than fine, more than adequate. Like I see their identity. Like I think they should keep this identity long term. I don't know about a lob threat, which is something people are clamoring for, only because the idea of vertical spacing with this team is probably better in theory than it actually is. I think that the actual like outside spacing just works better for this team. Again, a lot of that centers around Chet. I think, it's probably a moot point because there's no shot they have a chance with him, which is out of their control. I thought OG, just that fit of player, was perfect for them. And I don't know if I can even think of an OG comp, if there's an OG type in the draft, if somebody like that is available next summer. But like just like a big 3-4 type, more like a big wing that can guard 4 or 5 or multiple positions, that can still space the floor, that isn't, it isn't like, I know people want to patch up the rebounding thing, but with that, like, you don't just patch a rebound, like you add, other problems potentially. So that's kind of the side of the fence I'm on.
Yeah, I think that with this Thunder team, number one, absolutely right. Like, this identity was good enough, and this identity is going to continue to be good enough. So Chet is for sure a 5. Like, I'm not in the camp at all of going and moving Chet. Like, he should be the starting 5 from now to the end of his tenure in Oklahoma City. Can you bolster your front court depth where your only other big option is not Jay Will? Sure. Like that, I'm not anti that, but I am anti like these sweeping changes to move Chet to the 4, because I think that we've seen that does honestly more harm than good in practice with how good this team is. And as you mentioned, like for as panicked as people are about like rebounding and the style of play, everything worked against Dallas except for the fact that PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. were fantastic. And on a team that has, Kyrie and Luka, like if they're the ones that are being fantastic, then you're going to lose. And I'm sorry about it. The West is too good. The West is too tough. So if you're heading into every playoff series that you play in this Western Conference and you feel good about your ability to limit the stars in a star-driven league, you're going to win more often than not. Now, you're also going to get burned by Derek Jones Jr. and by PJ Washington, but the difference in those guys not shooting the piss out of the ball and the Thunder winning that series was not so deviate from the path that they were on as to move Chet to the 4 or to make any wholesale changes. Because the true outcome to change that series is, like you mentioned, you replay that series 10 more times, right? And that was the one time that they got both of the recipes for their shooters to go off that way. You saw that despite Derek Jones Jr. and PJ having good series against Minnesota, they did not shoot the ball that way. Minnesota did not defend the way the Thunder could defend. So, like, if the Thunder would have gotten that shooting output from Washington and from Jones Jr. That Minnesota got, the Thunder would have won that series. Like, that's as finicky and finicky as this stuff is. So, what you've built here and cultivated here is a group that has a chance against the premier talents in the West. And as strange as it might sound, like, that's the best you can hope for, because the West is so tough, and the West is going to be just a bloodbath of breaks. Like, who gets to play the worst of the best options? Who gets to stay the most healthy? The health aspect, the Thunder are probably never going to see as much health benefit as they got this season. As far as this offseason, in terms of being aggressive, I don't know what more you could want the Thunder to do. Like, they didn't do this stuff for no reason. They didn't clear up 4 roster spots for no reason. They didn't get top 5 in the league cap space for no reason. They don't have these mountain of assets for no reason. They've done their part. But as you mentioned, yes, OG is a perfect fit, but you said the key word, outside of their control. They can't just force OG Anunoby to come play basketball in Oklahoma City. So in terms of like the aggression level of what the Thunder should do, I think that they've done their part. They've got to see something materialize now. Now you've got to get a star put on the trade market. Now you've got to get a free agent willing to sign in Oklahoma City. But they've made the preparations for rain. The rain's got to come, though.
Yeah, I will say, like I said, I don't think they should make any seismic moves. Unless, well, no, I don't think they should make any seismic moves. I will say I don't think there's any room to be like frugal or anything. I mean, they have a ton of assets. I do think there's more of a window than they'll let on. And next year's purpose is not last year's purpose in terms of what you want to get out of the season. And so, like, to go into next season knowing you're a contender, to know that maybe you were a 5th starter away, that you could have put Josh Giddey in a different role if they are so, if they're so insistent on him being part of this core. I don't even know that they necessarily need a OG type of defender. I mean, that team defended so well. Maybe like some type of cross match between, an athlete like Derek Jones is, like another athlete that doesn't cramp your spacing, because obviously we know part of, the way teams defended Josh, which, was part of their slow starts, which, contributed to, the very few, offensive sets where they were maybe stumped or in dead zones. I think somebody who wouldn't, like, we know obviously that was in part because teams are so fearful of Chet, what he does as a 5, again, which is something that you would take away if he wasn't a 5. But I don't know that it has to be somebody, like, it just has to be somebody that with Chet, like, will kill you still. Maybe a 36% shooter, 37% shooter from deep, but like an athlete, like a real athlete. Maybe they don't have to be Derek Jones Jr. That dude's on another planet. Because again, like, the thing with the lob threats for me is that you're expecting this team to make a leap there in terms of throwing lobs. Like, they're not the best lob throwing team. Dub and Chet was like the strongest connection, and it only came. I mean, granted, it was timely, but it wasn't prominent. Like, it wasn't happening all the time. And so that's just another thing with this team. But I think an athlete that can kill closeouts, that can shoot well enough to where you're not defending him like Giddey, he's not getting played, out of the rotation, would suffice. I don't know that has to be, a perfect OG mirror. Maybe it doesn't have to be OG, but I do think there are moves to be made at the margins. And I lean big wing, and I know people will be pissed if that's not this summer because of, the way this team is positioned, but maybe this isn't the pool. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to materialize. Now, by that same token, like if there are players on the table and the Thunder have all these preparations made and they still, aren't comfortable going and making that move, then there's a totally different conversation that you and I are going to be willing to have on this show. But as of this very moment, they've done everything that they can do right now on June 4th to be an aggressive team and to be a team, that is in position to maximize this season and maximize this roster. And I think that the benefit that the Thunder have is the ability to pivot. And not a lot of teams have that. Like this was the last chance that Dallas had at pivoting. Nico Harrison mastered it. Like he went out last offseason, was aggressive, trading for Lively, getting Rashawn Holmes that he eventually parlayed into the Gatford deal, being able to go sign Grant Williams, thinking wholeheartedly that would work, being willing to give up a pick to get Grant Williams, and then half a season later, cutting bait with Grant Williams to bring in PJ Washington, who's been impeccable for this core. Like what Dallas has done does show you that you can do both. Like you can be aggressive, still make your observation at the beginning of the season, then make your pivot at the deadline. And the reason the Thunder are even more, suited for that is the access draft picks and the additional get out of jail free cards, so to say, that they have stored up versus other contending teams.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I will say this, like, again, fans will be pissed. The thing is, based on what Sam was saying that day, it sounds to me, and maybe, he was keeping this close to the vest, was it being completely genuine? It sounds like Josh Giddey is still part of the long-term plans. Now, what role that's in, I guess we won't know until next year because, like Sam says, the team you see now won't be the team you see come October. So maybe he is in a bench role. Maybe they try to really commit to that. I don't know what that'll look like, but I think for sure you have to know that you got to move on from him being the fifth starter. I think just upgrading there generally to what I've been talking about, just that kind of big forward. That's a need, I think. And then just what I will say, like with the deadline thing, like I like obviously that changed Dallas's trajectory, but I'm not sure. I don't know that I'm as sure of what Presti thinks about the deadline. Like I maybe thought I had an idea before he talked that day, and now it seems like I don't know. He made it seem like he was reluctant to deal at the deadline, at least even though he obviously didn't regret the Gordon Hayward deal because it's multi-dimensional. You could have cap space. There was layers to that, but him trying to go after a player he thought he could work in with that amount of time that he thought could be in a playoff rotation, he didn't seem too confident on it. He said he missed, and so I don't know. Maybe we're looking at that wrong. Maybe we're looking at things too black and white. But I don't know if it feels like if it feels like the changes that need to happen in the summer, unless there's like some revelation there mid-season. But again, maybe Gordon was Sam's mid-season revelation. I mean, I don't know that he was pressed for Gordon to be some star level role player because it seemed he was convinced with this season, the purpose of the season being development, but that's obviously not the case next season, right?
Yeah, that's going to be totally different next year. Like you're not going to have that to kind of fall back on. But coming up, what are some internal developments that the Thunder can make this summer to continue to grow as a team? But first, want to say right now, but our friends over at BetterHelp. BetterHelp can really help everyone, including Joel Lorenzi, because they're awesome. And sometimes we all need somebody to talk to and get things off our chest. You don't want to let them fester and carry it with you all day, all week, all month, all year, or even the rest of your life. So you want to be able to get them off your chest by talking to someone. And it's especially beneficial at times to talk to somebody external, someone that's not a part of your life, someone unbiased who is going to come into these things with an open mind to help you maybe see some things more clearly. That's why you should give BetterHelp a try. I think that, we're both very busy. A lot of people listening are very busy, listening to the show on the go. And you could be thinking to yourself, like, I could benefit from therapy, but I just don't have the time. I do not have the ability to put my life on pause for an hour and go to an actual therapist's office. That's the key of BetterHelp. BetterHelp is entirely online and entirely suited around your schedule. So it is convenient, it's flexible, and it's suited for you. You can carve out the time to hop online with a licensed therapist. What you do is you take this questionnaire, they match you with a therapist, and hopefully that initial match will be perfect. If not, you just redo it and get a new therapist free of charge until you find the one that's right for you. Go there right now, get it off your chest with BetterHelp, betterhelp.com/LockedInNBA. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedInNBA for 10% off of your first month. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Joel, let's start internally with Josh Giddey. Like let's say Josh Giddey is going to be on the opening night roster. Here's where I think that the Josh Giddey conversation is the most pretzel-inducing, because you can grab pieces and parts of Sam Presti's presser and none of it adds up. Like, we don't really know what's going to happen here. Number one, when he was asked about the Josh Giddey extension, he mentioned that they don't have to extend this year. They have another year to wait. Historically, he's not been willing to let guys hit restricted free agency. Now, he also mentioned all throughout the press conference that he's got to pivot some ideas. Maybe that's one of the ideas that he has to pivot. Number two, he mentioned how the way that the Thunder have to operate is finding a way to leverage some of Josh Giddey's best skills, where his best skill is his on-ball potential and his on-ball playmaking. You can't have that in the starting lineup. You cannot have that with Shai and J-Dub. You're not going to take those guys off the ball. So now you're having him in a contract year play away from the ball, if he wants to be a starter, or come off the bench. In a contract year, is that where Josh Giddey wants to be at? Like, this is a two-sided dilemma. It's not just what the Thunder want, what the Thunder need to maximize. And then you have that third option of could it work? Like could this work at all? Period. So I think that Josh Giddey, I think that he wants to ideally have it work out here, but by the same token, you've got to do what's best for you. So there's a lot to unpack with the Josh Giddey stuff, and it's tough to, like you mentioned, read what Sam said about the trade deadline and think that that's going to be a more viable option. So the bottom line is this summer is huge for Josh Giddey, no matter where he plays basketball in October. It's going to be a big opportunity to play for his home country in the Olympics and play in a more natural role that's suited for his play style. It's going to be big in terms of he's eligible for a contract. It's going to be big in terms of he's got to improve his game just no matter what, no matter whose jersey he wears in October. So with all that being said, what's your gauge on just Josh Giddey, the player, and kind of where we land on opening night?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of layers there. I do think it's interesting because, if you read his words, if you read the transcript of his exit interview, he's saying, he gets asked about playing for Australia this summer, and he's like, yeah, I'll be on the ball. That's who I am. He goes out of his way to say that's the kind of player I am. So clearly there's some, self-acknowledgement of who he is, who he remains even after playing off the ball for a year. And, when he's asked about, what he'll hope to work on this summer, what he'll hone in on, he leaped to say shooting. And so if Josh Giddey working with this core is dependent on shooting, I guess you just have to figure out where you land on whether that's, if a period of shooting for him is sustainable, if he can be, within a summer, if he can become a good enough shooter to kind of offset what teams want to do with Chet, or what teams want to do, period, and just in terms of leaving him completely alone, abandoning him, parking a big under the rim. Are you confident that he'll be 37, 38% shooter, that those looks will be in rhythm, that, you have to decide where you'll be there. But, and then, with Sam, I don't know that I know I haven't been around long. I don't know that I've seen enough to think, let's say they do put him in a different role. Let's say they do make him the bench facilitator, which I imagine he would be even then secondary kind of playmaker, because after what you just saw from Dub last year, I don't know why you would want to kind of take him off the ball as the primary guy in those second units and stuff. But let's say Josh is in that role. I don't know, 3 months of that, if it doesn't look like what you thought it did, if he still can't be an off-ball player, does Sam seem like the type to pivot from him at the deadline? I mean, none of the things I think fans are like clamoring for with Giddey in this, Thunder utopia or dystopia rather. Like they don't seem like Sam thinks. Like it doesn't seem like Sam. It didn't seem like Sam, honestly, to move off of Giddey at this past deadline after 3 months of next season. I don't know that that'll be the case then either, assuming Giddey isn't, who people want him to be.
Yeah, so I think that you look at Josh Giddey, and here's how it plays out. To work in Oklahoma City, either he is developing a good enough shooting game, no knock to Josh Giddey, but even working with the best shooting coach in the world, this style of play is not suited for him. It's unfair to him, frankly, to relegate him to this role. You're not at all tapping into who he could be as an individual talent, which is a product of how fast and how good the Thunder have gotten as an entity, that they can no longer put Josh Giddey in a position to be the best version of Josh Giddey he can be. But let's just say that Josh wants to make it work here regardless of that fact. Okay? He can be a good enough shooter. He's not going to blow you away ever. Like, we don't see those leaps happen where they just become these unbelievable shooters, but he can be good enough. So his role would be this catch and shoot guy who, in the realm of the Thunder, right, when you say it out loud of how you would defend them, even if Josh Giddey's good enough, the best course of option is still to leave him alone, because you'd rather invest that attention in Shai and J-Dub and Chet. The best course of action is still to play the way you've played this entire season. He's just going to hit more of those threes that you've got to match. So then you use him as a screener and like let him play make out of the short roll. You use him in the dunker spot or as a cutter. Then you lean into, he's only really had one fantastic stretch of rim finishing in his career. It did in this season. He looked really good doing it from March 1st through the end of the Pelican series. But, again, that's not a style that's suited to get the best out of Josh Giddey, who is, like, I think that we forget that, like, Josh Giddey matters here. Like, he matters. His opinion and his viewpoint of what he wants from this matters just as much as what the Thunder want from this. And so then how else can you do it in Oklahoma City? Like you mentioned, you can relegate him to the bench because now you've kind of popped that bubble, right? That 218 game starting streak is now snapped. So it makes it easier to go back to that well now, not mess with the juju, not mess with whatever was the excuses of why you didn't bench him earlier. So now you bench him. As we mentioned, in the contract year is coming off the bench. He still, like you mentioned, is not going to have the total reins of the playmaking chances because you're still going to stagger J-Dub and let him run the show to start the fourth quarter and to have these spurts to start second quarter and so on. But you still get him more opportunities in a role he's comfortable with. Is that enough? Like, is that enough for him to thrive both individually, find satisfaction there, and is that the best version of this team that you can get? So from all angles that you're coming at this, again, it's just a lot to unpack of like, how does this make sense for everybody involved?
Yeah, my upgrade thing is more so like acknowledging like what that version of Josh looks like. Like the wrinkles are cool, like the replace actions he does with Chet, when the backside stuff works and teams slip up there. But like overall, like a lot of it depends on he's gonna have to be a better shooter. And maybe the push shot has to fall at like an unbelievable rate because that's like his go-to look with some of the spacing that comes out of this stuff. And so like, yeah, like you have to ask yourself, he has to ask himself if that version of him is, what will lead to a budding career. I mean, the version of Giddey that got people jumping, that had people gleaming with promise in their eyes, right? Like was the Giddey that could be on the ball and facilitating. Like he admitted that in his exit interview. Just that's who he is. And so it is a tough question they'll face. I do wonder, if he, has any. If Sam's thing on, they don't have to have the conversation now, how he maybe feels about that, if he's putting any weight on that, if he knows of Sam's history with that at all, because I thought it was an interesting tidbit for sure, and I do wonder how they're approaching the conversation.
Yeah, and you look at too for Josh. I think that Josh's biggest swing is not 3-point shooting, because I think that even if you invested everything in your being into that 3-point shot, he would become just a good, a decent 3-point shooter. Like he made significant strides as a 3-point shooter this year. So it's a lot to ask of him to get even better and even better and even better. If he can, as I mentioned on the show last summer, if he can score inside the arc at will, the floater, scoring at the rim with it and utilizing his frame better as he learned to do later on in the season, if he can score inside the arc, including on the ball, then he takes a next leap as a player. Not necessarily the catch and shoot three stuff, which is the most seamless way right now with the role he's in right now. But I mean, he leaped up to 33% from three this year, from 32% last year, but from a starting point of 26% his first year in OKC. So he's gotten better, but what's left? Like what's left to reach in that aspect? I think he can get to a 35, 37% shooter, but that still is not someone that you're hugging on away from the ball. But if he can make himself dynamite scoring on ball, then he unlocks a different layer to himself. He unlocks something different that he can tap into. Away from Josh Giddey, I look at Jalen Williams as a player who can improve internally. And I'm throwing Shai in this as well, because I think that like Chet Holmgren, he's going to take an uptick in production next year. I think a lot of it will come from those two guys and not Chet. A lot of it will come from Shai and J-Dub have to be better getting him the basketball in the pick and roll, have to be better getting him opportunities early and often, because you've got to learn to trust Chet Holmgren as a guy who is a lethal pick and pop option, a lethal pick and roll option, but also a very good passer for his size. So if you go to him early in the pick and roll and the defense rotates perfectly and they take it away, he's going to get you the ball back. I promise you, he's going to redirect that ball out to one of you. And then you two can go take your tough mid-range shots and break the defense's back by demoralizing them. But when you try to do that first, and you try to get to your tough spot first, and then rely on Chet, you're kind of neutering the overall impact that he can have. Now, this is also partly on Chet, because there's oftentimes on Chet where the ball gets swung to him, especially at the top of the key, where when you look at him catch the ball, he's catching it in this triple threat stance, ready to get it to the next action and not looking to shoot. He's got to be looking to shoot more when the ball swings his way on the perimeter. But you can unlock a heck of a lot from him by just improving as table setters in the pick and roll.
No doubt. I thought, everybody, I imagine, thought this after the Dallas series, but it was just revelatory in terms of Dub, the creator. There's still strides to be made there. Obviously, the handle for his bulk, his size, is fascinating. Just as a pick and roll option, his push dribble, getting to his spots is no problem. Hitting tough shots, at least in the regular season, was no problem. And so that package is there, but it's like when the guy pulls away from the corner, can you start making that skip pass? Can you make the pass over when somebody helps from the nail? The defense pressed higher on him. They really challenged his handle. I thought they really challenged his peripheral line of vision, and some of that stuff was glaring. And so obviously, like you said, getting Chet the ball is one, but I think we'll end up talking about this a lot this summer. Making better pick and roll reads. Because I thought Dub, ironically, because that's the guy that's hitting Chet for every lob, I thought there were some simple reads probably to be made throughout that series that just weren't there for him for whatever reason, which I guess those will come with development. But like you said, Chet, I got a couple of these clips on my page just of real time Chet catching it at the free throw line. Like I said, hitting like Isaiah Joe cutting backdoor or hitting the corner for a case and three. He can make plays there. I was stunned with, and I guess, this was maybe a theme for people all year, just, how little Chet was involved relative to what he maybe could have been. But in that series especially, with the way Derek Lively's defending, with, the way Dallas is shutting off their water and the actions they usually want to run, the guard stuff, the perimeter stuff that, depends on miscommunication with switches. I thought they could have went to him more and forced him to make a play in the middle, but it obviously didn't happen. And so that's one thing. I think with Dub, we mentioned this earlier, but just getting to the free throw line, whatever that looks like for him. I know some people will argue like that's like a star perception thing, like among refs. I won't speculate, but just not just finishing through contact, but initiating contact. I know people have their thoughts on like grifting or whatever. I'm not saying he has to be that, but like selling contact.
I think that he initiates the contact very well, but selling the contact, like that's what you've got to learn how to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so some of that, which all the great creators I think are able to do. That's next for Dub, I think.
Do you have anyone else that's like glaring? Like my glaring one is like getting better in the pick and roll, getting better finding Chet. Do you have anything else like you're really looking for someone or something on this Thunder team to improve next year?
I think there are. I think Reed is like the thing for a lot of guys, because I thought when the drive and kick fell flat, like when it didn't lead to anything because of the way Dallas was defending, I thought there were reads, and not just Shai and Dub. I think that's who it gets pinned on most, because those are the guys who are in the pick and roll most, who are in the actions most, who should be making the reads. But like Dort, I give Dort credit because his shot selection mostly, like generally changed. It's mostly healthy now, and that's why I think that probably contributed to the shooting jump. But there were times like it felt like Dort was shooting ill-timed shots still. Like there were reads to be made there in terms of just putting it on the floor, just getting it out of your hands. But also like some of the driving kicks, like they really died with Dort, I thought, in that series. Like he just couldn't drive. Like let's say it was like Gafford on the perimeter or whoever. Like he just couldn't drive them and make an advantageous read. He would maybe just get off it. And I don't know that Dort has to become some crazy like ball handler or something like that. But I think there are I imagine he picked up on some of this in the film, but like I think there are reads to be made from a bunch of guys, especially if like this is gonna be their identity and it can, swing so far that way in terms of variance. Like there has to be more to the reads and just kind of reacting to I mean, everybody's not Dallas, but reacting to some of that stuff.
Joel, this was a lot of fun. Where can they find you? What are you cooking up? Anything else you want to leave us with? Yeah,
of course. I got some long form stuff going on. Obviously, that's my thing. So cooking some of that stuff up this summer for sure. I'll be at the draft. I'll be at Summer League, I think Salt Lake and Vegas. So wherever people need to see me, maybe even where they're looking for me, they'll find me. I'll try to be more on Twitter, Rylan, so they can find me at the below, So and by the way, the BetterHelp, I didn't want to interject, but BetterHelp, maybe you need that for your Darius Baisley obsession. I was thinking that as you were reading off that ad. So listen,
there's a lot of people who can make Darius Baisley jokes, but you are not one of them. At JX Lorenzi on Twitter. Joel, a lot of people on the beat, a lot of Thunder media members were tweeting hours after the Sam Presti presser ended. The Sam Presti presser is 40 pages long. Oh my gosh, it's 20,000 words. It was a big Twitter discussion. I don't know why everybody's so caught up in that. That's a Hornets gamer for Joel Lorenzi. Check him out at JX Lorenzi on Twitter. Until next time, be good and be good to